non-profit company over here, and you may well know you one after the other company. Just feast your eyes on this picture for a minute. It's Africa. It's actually the Ponderland. And the incredible thing about that picture is it's nobody's cannabis, it's everybody's cannabis. No one person planted it. It's been perpetuating in that kraal for literally hundreds of years. It is not, half of it is not taken out of the valley. It's used as winter feed for cattle and livestock. It has got about 3.7% THC in it, which therefore makes it an illegal dependence-producing drug with no medical applications whatsoever. And if you look at the deep background of that picture and all those emerald stripes across the valley, it goes on for 20 kilometers as far as the eye can see. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's one of the most amazing feelings you've ever had in your life to be in a field of weed that stretches as far as the eye can see. There's something really, really beautiful about it. Are there any legislators listening to me? Is SAPRA here? Any of the licensing people? Any of the fuddy-duddies that want to try and ban this plant? Anybody in the audience here that's trying to eradicate it? Because they've all tried for 100 years. So my question is, when we go through the process of legalizing cannabis, what's anybody going to do with this cannabis? Because this is unique cannabis in the whole world. It rarely happens anywhere in the world that cannabis is just left to its own devices for 300 years. And nobody has got a plan for this yet, and this is the powerhouse of African cannabis. So I just want to guide you through the journey as to why I'm stood here at the moment, because I promise you it wasn't meant to be me. In 2010, Myrtle and I were arrested in our home, and because we had some cannabis in the house, we were charged with dealing in drugs. Not possession of cannabis, dealing in drugs. Has anybody been in that position before? You look as if you've been in that position before. You are treated like a dog. It's the only statute law in the country where you are guilty before you are proved innocent. And it makes a big difference during that weekend in jail with no food, and you're the closest one to the toilet because you were the last one in. So everybody has three choices when they get arrested. The first one is, you could admit your guilt and pay a fine and get a criminal record for being part of a crime that doesn't have a victim. Where is the victim when you are smoking cannabis on your couch in the police rocker? For there to be a crime, harm must be done. And in my case, I was just smoking weed on my couch and I wasn't harming anybody. We could pay a bribe at the time. This was happening in 2010, by the way. And at the time, it was 40,000 rand each, and it would have all gone away. Except, I grow lots of weed, and I intended growing weed the next year. And if I had, they would have just come back again looking for another 40 grand. So we had one more choice, and that was to change the law. And that is a choice all of you have. But one day I got so incensed. I've smoked cannabis for 42 years of my life, pretty much constantly, and some cop 10 years ago tells me I can't put weed in my body. So we wrote an affidavit to the High Court claiming our human rights to do just that. There isn't anybody on the planet that can tell me what I cannot do with my body. It's called sovereignty. The sovereignty of your body is the last thing you've got. It's your last bastion of privacy. Hold on to it because they're going to try and take it away. And for the first time ever in our court case, we managed to put the concept of cognitive liberty into law. And cognitive liberty is kind of like freedom of speech for your brain. It is the freedom to be able to think the way you want to think. And my analogy is, I used to do loads of crosswords, and I might be able to get halfway through the crossword, and then I smoke a big fat joint, and I go back to the crossword, I can do another 15, because I've opened my brain laterally with that key, and that's what cannabis as an entheogenic plant does. It opens opportunities in your mind for exploration that don't exist in your normal life. And I and my partner Myrtle are claiming that right to have the freedom of my mind. The press got hold of it because we were successful. Our case was put on hold pending a constitutional challenge to prove to the government that it is my sanctity. And as you know, in September 2018, the Constitutional Court gave us this judgment. And it's a very, very profound judgment. It has given us everything and absolutely nothing at the same time. It is a total paradox, this judgment. Personally, my paranoia levels, after being a cannabis user for 3-4 decades, disappeared. And nobody knows how it affects you unless you're a cannabis user. Is there anybody here that doesn't use cannabis products? Well, I would like to welcome you to our world, because we come in peace and we absolutely categorically believe that the freedom of cannabis will be a very positive thing for this country, for all and sundry. We are not doing this as anarchists, we are doing this because we truly believe we are going to make a better world by busting up prohibition. Since that judgment, it's gone mental. There are concentrate cups, there are cook-offs, there are private clubs opening, there are music sessions, there are expos like this, there are night markets, Soweto carnivals, more stuff in the street. We have a year-old podcast running. This is our flagship party in Johannesburg. This year, 5,000 people came and they all blazed it up, and the police watched because they couldn't do anything else for the first time in history. It was a super cool feeling. So in the course of this new world where we are now allowed to use cannabis in the privacy of our own home, we're very scared that the government are going to come up with some serious control mechanisms to stop scaly smokers like me running amok in the street with a zombie apocalypse, driving into children discriminately and killing them all in wanton mayhem. So, this is our mantra. There will be nothing about the laws without us. The cannabis community, the people that use cannabis on a daily basis for whatever reason you use it, I don't care. If you want to call it medicine, call it whatever you like. So, you can't get what you want unless you know what you want. So between us all at Fields of Green for All, we've produced a document that is now running at 100 pages, and it is every last nut and bolt that we found in our travels around the world, pulling different principles of legalization from different models around the world. And we think this is the most expansive book that has ever been written by civil society to offer to government as a solution to how to turn what essentially is a movement into this brand new industry. At the same time, because we have these privacy laws, there are ways around it now to use cannabis in a private space. Right now, I have got 2 grams of weed in my top pocket, and it is my private space. Can you believe that absolutely nobody in this country can take that weed out of my pocket without them themselves breaking a law? So that's a very cool thing. So we've expanded on this to produce a document about Dagga private clubs. And we take it from Spain because in Barcelona alone, there are over 130 private clubs, and we personally believe that it is one of the greatest models for legalization anywhere in the world, because the Spaniards have really extraordinarily tough privacy laws. The police aren't even allowed to think what's behind that closed door. They just don't go there. So I know of 3 clubs in Joburg, I'm a member of 3 clubs in Cape Town, there are 2 in Durban that I know of, and the reason you don't know anything about them is because they are private. If you know about a Dagga private club, they are doing it wrong. Keep it off social media, keep it between yourselves. The documents over here at Fields of Green for All, we're not saying this is the law, you're still breaking the law in principle. But what we call it in drug parlance from Europe, from drug speed, is principled non-compliance. You are breaking the law with as much integrity as you possibly can. It's written down, there are members, there are a constitution, there are duties, everything about it is opaque. So I suggest if any of you are interested in trying this out, we will help you along the way, because we believe there is a huge future for private clubs. It's basically a drug consumption room, just like a bar is over there. The Keg and Whistle is a drug consumption room. Hi guys, where are you going to watch rugby? Which drug consumption room are you going to watch the rugby in today? It's the same thing. We just want a private space where people, like-minded people, can come to a safe environment to use cannabis products and talk amongst themselves. It's not too much to ask. It all revolves around the cops. It's the cops that are holding us back. So here's a few words, here's a few keywords that we're shoving at government, because these regulations have to be proportional. There's a lot of talk about the government telling you can only grow 10 plants or 15 or whatever. So that would presume that somebody's going to come around and count only plants. Who has ever had anybody arrive at your house to count how many beers you've got in your fridge? So that's what proportionality means. They can't legislate cannabis any harshly than they do weed and alcohol, because alcohol killed 7,500 South Africans last year. Certainty. Right now we're in flux. Nobody's certain about anything. And if we don't do it right, we're going to be doing it time and time again. They have to stand the test of time. And this is a big one. It has to be transparent, because remember, we are doing this to make the world a better place. Not for the government to cash in on it, and we need transparency from everybody. Capable regulators. The government believes they know everything about weed, so they want to regulate it for us. We completely disagree. The only people that can regulate cannabis are cannabis users. They're the only people who understand it. And it has to be relevant to South Africa, because this is not Canada, this is not Uruguay, it's not California, it's South Africa. And just go back to the very first photograph. Check this out, have a little look at this. So we all want fair regulations, and at the moment, the biggest push of all is for this regulation with licenses from the medical fraternity. We call that commercial cannabis. We call that barcoded cannabis. Cannabis that is going to be used in a high-end situation. You're going to go into clicks and you're going to get it off the shelf. It'll be scanned and it will be a pharmaceutical product. But I don't want to get into any of that. I do not want to be in bed with my government, and I want to continue to grow cannabis till the day I die of nothing, because I'll be really healthy. So on the left-hand side is legacy cannabis, and that's you and I. That's the people that are growing South African weed in their gardens, in the fields, in the Transkei. Legacy cannabis is the landrace cannabis that goes back centuries with all that amazing medicine within it. Both those types of cannabis can exist side by side, we believe, because there's enough to go around. But you have to be conscious about it. The only people that will survive in a future cannabis industry are the people that are conscious of it, because we're trying to change the world for a better place. The two black sides on the left-hand side, if you're not conscious about your cannabis, it will end up being unregulated cannabis, uninformed people selling snake oil, criminal intent, and they will all fall along the wayside, because cannabis will teach them a lesson. Consider this. At the moment, at the bottom of the tree there, everybody is now being forced this idea that we have to have serious regulations for medicine. And right at the very, very top of it, they haven't regulated any CBD. Look, they haven't regulated CBD. It's completely out in the open. So what we want to do is turn it on its head, because the most regulations at the moment for medicine are for the most amount of people. But that's untrue. The most amount of regulations should be for the least amount of people. At the bottom of there, the demographic of the humans, the 1% of the people that will be using medical cannabis from clicks. I have an analogy. There's a mother of two. She's a single mother. She wakes up in the morning, the kid's coughing. She trusts cannabis implicitly. So she goes to the pharmacy on the way to school, she dashes into the counter, there's a bottle of medical cannabis that she recognizes because it worked the last time. It's got a barcode. She's a busy mum. She grabs it, she forces it down the kid's head, and they go to school and the cough goes away. That's medical cannabis with a license and a barcode. She hasn't got the time for anything else, but millions of South Africans do. There's a place for all of us. This is what we believe is going on in South Africa right now. There are various different ways of growing it. There are different uses for it. We never call it recreational weed. I certainly don't use cannabis recreationally. Every single time I put it in my lungs, it is for a purpose. Recreational means you're doing it for no apparent reason and you're just being a dick. No. Traditional, cultural and spiritual use, we have the upper hand to anybody else in the world that's tried to legalize cannabis, because the traditional healers and the Rastafari make up hundreds and thousands of our population. We never call it medical. It puts you in a position for failure, and it puts people on, it sort of gives people false hope, in our opinion. We just call it a health product. Nobody really knows if it cures anything. There's too many things involved in it. And I truly believe that. The takeaway for this is on the right-hand side, in the middle, it says 900,000 farmers. You read that right. We believe that there are over 900,000 cannabis farmers in South Africa, and they've been there for generations. So what are we going to do about those guys? Are we going to sell up 50 grand licenses or something? They're here to stay. They're not going away, but they don't want to fit into a medical paradigm. And we actually believe 20 million people use cannabis in South Africa, a third of this country, because 60% of South Africa is under the age of 30. And the young people know that the prohibition of this plant is a crop. And right away across the bottom of there it says the success of a country's drug policy is directly proportional to the size of its black market. And what that means is, in California right now, 80%, it's a legal state, 40 million people voted for it to be legal. 40 million, it's like 2/3 of this country. Massive. 80% of all transactions after a year of legalization are still on the underground market because the government has put a 40% tax on sales. Silly. So if the government get greedy, we'll just ring the man. We don't want to buy government twat with 40% tax on it. We're quite capable of growing really, really cheap, amazing legacy cannabis. So government, if there's any government, if you get greedy, you're not going to get legalization the way you want it. This is a big thing. I was at a conference last week in Cape Town called Canatech, and it was the most international stage I've ever spoken on. And the whole of Canatech bases what they know about some European documents that have come out with projections as to how much legal cannabis is going to be worth on the African subcontinent. And they were talking about $160 billion by 2026. I don't think so for 1 minute, because they didn't take that into account. This here is the powerhouse of Africa, and it is 80% of South Africa's GDP. The underground market, what we call Kasinomics, the economics of the Kasi, they don't pay tax, so they're invisible. So when South Africa says 27% unemployment, it's not, because they don't take into account the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people around South Africa that are trading every day and not paying tax. We actually believe the unemployment rate in South Africa is closer to 7%. It goes up by 7% a year. And when we showed this to the Canadians and the Americans and the Israelis and the Europeans, they went, because this has to be tapped into. And if that man at that taxi rank selling that swaz in that matchbox is not legal, then it's not legal. And we're going to fight tooth and nail because we mean it. Fields of green for all, even him. Very important. So we poke our noses all over the place. We go to the United Nations twice a year to see what the main man's doing. And it's getting very, very exciting because we believe in March next year we will go to Vienna and listen to CND, the Commission of Narcotic Drugs, and we believe that they are going to deschedule the plant in its entirety. They're going to take the plant completely out of all of the drug protocols. And when that happens, the regulatory authorities are going to have no leg to stand on. Our work involves sustainable development, because I'll say it again, we are doing this because we believe the world will be a better place for it. There are 26 cannabis sustainable development goals until 2030, ending poverty, ending hunger, gender equality, freedom of religion. And these are some of the things that cannabis can dovetail into these sustainable development goals. 17 of these 26 goals can be addressed by the legalization of cannabis. This book is also available at our store. We're very proud of it. It's a civil society document from the UN. It was a collaboration between Fields of Green and 10 other international NGOs. It was a big day. So this is what we think it should be. And this, by the way, is the same but different to the previous document. This is now a grower taking his harvest to a hub, a co-op, a stock farm, just like you do with mealies, those big silos. Everybody takes their mealies to the silos. It gets checked for quality, pesticides, yield, etc. You get paid for it there. You pay us an income tax on it, and everybody goes away happy. The hub distributes it, and the distributors send it to retail. Guess what? This has been happening for 300 years. We just want to bring it into the light. And we literally mean every single person in South Africa that is putting bread on the table, just legitimize them. Stop calling them dealers and call them entrepreneurs. Take away the drug speak. Dealer. Just call them shopkeepers. It'll be a lot easier. We do not have to invent anything. It's there. It's worth billions of rand a year, and it's highly sophisticated, and it's ancient. You see the two of them go side by side. So literally that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to just bring what we have into the light and just move forward. It's too much for the government to grasp at times though. They don't like self-regulation. They don't want you and me to regulate ourselves. Whoa! Who has been in a jail for the weekend? Okay, so everybody wants a license to grow weed, but most of the people that are at the front of the queue have never had harm done to them by the authorities about cannabis. And I can tell you, for every person that has spent a weekend in jail at the behest of the SAP, this does not sit well with them at all. The people that have been oppressing us for 100 years now just want to tax us. It doesn't end well. In Lesotho, we believe there are up to 40 licenses now. 2 years ago, they cost 50 grand. This week, they cost $500,000, 24 months later. Nobody is growing weed in Lesotho. 2 companies, we believe, the licenses have become the commodity. Nobody has an intention of growing weed. If you try growing weed in Lesotho, it's painful. It's got like a 6-week summer and no light in the valleys. The only reason people are growing medical weed in Lesotho is they're allowed to. It's a really silly place to try. But humans being humans, they gotta be first. Last week, 2 weeks ago on 702, a cannabis farm in South Africa said, we're gonna grow loads of weed, we've got a license, we're gonna make tinctures and balms and stuff and suppositories and sell weed and everything's gonna be cool. But the regulatory authority said, no, you haven't. You haven't got a license at all. They thought they had a license. And remember that word, uncertainty? It's totally in flux. There are no licenses. There are maybe some farms that might qualify because they've got hundreds of millions of dollars or rand in cash flow to run it. While we're talking about licensing, why not talk about this lot here? That is the awaiting trial block in Polesmore Prison. 80% of the people in that room at any one time are low-level cannabis users, and the only problem they have, the only reason they're in there, is because they don't have any bail money. What about them? What about these guys? They have been in Westville jail for 2 years without bail for growing 4 kilos of weed in Port Shepstone. We send, look, they've got Fields of Green t-shirts on. We send them what we can, when we can. But it's the tip of the iceberg. When anybody says anything about a license, you've got the cart before the horse. Let's break down prohibition first and give these incredible growers a chance. We call it Stop the Cops because all of this is illegal now. You can't have a cop walk onto the property, eye the weed and go, you've got 28 plants, you're a dealer, and he pulls them all out, because that's what the cops are doing. So every week we name and shame the cops that bust people without warrants and trash the plants. We literally put videos up of them. We show people the fact that there is no warrant, and every week on the Fields of Green for All blog, we have a Stop the Cops blog roll that will make you weep as to what people can do to other people. What about this? Does anybody still want a license? Because now you can go home and smoke as much weed as you want, but you're going to go to work on Monday and get a piss test, and you will fail it. But it's not because you are impaired, it's just because you've got weed in your system. But people lose their jobs immediately because of that. And that is a really evil, unconstitutional thing. I personally have had a very tough life because I've flatly refused all of my life to work for anybody and sign a contract where they would be interested in my bodily fluids. It is no business of anybody's what's in your body. And never forget it. And for those of you who have been in jail, incarcerated, and done bad by, and treated like a pig by the police, this is what it's about. How dare they even think they could get away with making money out of weed and paying their bills while we suffer and we cannot trade and pay our taxes with the trade in cannabis. It doesn't sit well. It is doomed to failure. It's not all about the weed. We need support industries. You see a whole bunch of them around. There's an insurance company trying to insure crops, but he's a bit early because all the crops are illegal, remember. But the thought is there. People are going to rob your weed. People will rob your weed. We need quality control. We need teachers. We need people to go to university. We need doctors who are able to script. There isn't a single person in this building, I'll say it again, there isn't a single person in this building that is medically qualified to administer cannabis as a medicine. Nobody got trained in this country about the endocannabinoid system, categorically. I can promise you. It's false hope. What about the environment? Load shedding, no electricity, and everybody wants to put up 1,000-watt lights to grow weed. What? What? Think about it, guys. We're trying to make the world a better place. Solar powers, LEDs, self-sustainability. Nobody talks about caregiving. What about growing weed for people that need it or for people who can't grow it? What about the legislation for that? Gifting, caregivers. South African research. We based everything on all of the bad stuff the Americans produce to keep prohibition in place. We need the good story as well. 96% of all trials and all reports in America are to find the harm in the plant, and it's paid for by a prohibition government. Workers' rights. Farmers pay their workers an abysmal amount of money at the best of times. We won't even entertain a minimum wage. It has to be double what it is, because we're going to treat the people who work in cannabis well because they deserve it, because we're trying to make the world a better place. And if the government thinks the only way to get foreign exchange is to sell a Canadian corporation a whole bunch of licensing, Well, I promise you, I am blessed that I travel the world doing this. I've been all over the place this year, and we've got so many amazing, legendary genetics. Everybody's waiting to come and spend money here smoking weed. Tourism. Tourism will save our planet here. But we have to make sure the neighbours get to hear about it, because we've just done Namibia, and Namibia is 20 years behind everybody. It's scary what the drug squad do in Namibia. It's like 1980 in Windhoek. It's hectic. If any of you complain about this weird flux that we're in, that we can't trade, go to Windhoek and feel that place out. It is oppressive. People are brutalized for weed. In Swaziland, they're complaining that they can't get weed across the border and get a decent price because South Africa is overgrowing their government. There's weed everywhere in South Africa. All of a sudden, Swazi sales are down. So it's important that we talk to the SADC region, basically, to tell them what we're doing. How can you help? Well, because we're a non-profit company, we're the only people in this room that isn't actually selling anything except information. We have affiliate programs. If you have a company that you would like to get out into cannabis land, because we've got such an organization now, we can actually flick the switch on social media and emails to over 130,000 people. So if you want your brand within our group, in our legit group, then we have various affiliate programs ranging from 49 rand a month to thousands of rand a month, depending on how you feel. I can't tell you anything else. Always, we have to beg for the money. Non-profit is a weird thing, but we've just dropped 40,000 rand for printing of a new book. So we'd like the money back for the printing, and we sell them at cost just to get it back, because we are trying to get information to you as cheaply as possible. So pick this book up, and with this book, in it, is an introduction to what we are calling the South African National Cannabis Survey. And Myrtle today is in Parliament. The reason I'm doing this alone is Myrtle flew today to give a presentation to Parliament about the National Survey. Because you can't regulate cannabis until you know how many people are using it, what they use it for, is it problematic use, have you been in jail before, how much land have you got available to grow it, and so it goes on. We believe it will take a year and a half to do the survey, but we can't forge really solid regulations without knowing the answers. Because I've got 2 reports on my desk from last week, and one group in England saying it's worth $180 billion by 2023, but now another company from Mumbai say it's worth $80 billion in 2 years' time, and they're all sucking their thumbs. So help us out. We're going to do this national survey. It's like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for weed, and we can't move forward without it. I put this up every single time I speak anywhere in the world, because this is the crux of it all. This is how we started our journey. I don't personally have a medical argument. I don't care. I don't want to make socks. I don't care about hemp. I really don't. And the spiritual use of it, I know about that because I'm a cannabis user and it helps my spirit. But it is no business of anybody what I do with my body, and that is the ticket that we've gone on all along. Everybody thinks I'm really, really crazy about weed. I'm not as crazy about weed as I am about human rights, because there is not a stitch of human rights in any of the world's drug policies. The Canadians have what they call a cannabis control bill. It's 130 pages of PDF, and it lays down the law for the first G20 country to fly in the face of the United Nations and legalize weed for all Canadians, except there is not one mention of human rights. It's the most draconian piece of legalization you've ever seen in your life. My name's Julian Stubbs, and all I want is fields of green for all. Thank you very much.